Okay. So thank you all for coming. Today we are having this session around this book called Singing in the Dark. So brilliantly, of course, on screen it comes reverse. Uh, Brilliantly curated by Sachida, who has joined us today, and Nishi, who will join us tomorrow. Welcome to the Cappuccino Adda Singing in the Dark Festival, 2 days, today and tomorrow. Uh, Actually, I was trying to figure out what to say in introduction of our speakers, but it's firstly, of course, that the poets who are going to join us today and tomorrow are the sort who don't need introductions. They're known widely enough. And if one starts to introduce, we would go halfway into the session with just the introductions because you all have achieved so much in the literary sphere. But as a formality, I will read out just short introductions from the book itself. First, of course, is K Satchidanandan, who has edited this book, and it's a feat that just after the lockdown, it's hardly been these many months. I doubt if an anthology with 100 poets has ever come out so quickly. It's and so well brought out. I mean, the production value, the editing, everything is perfect. So K. Satchidanandan is a leading Indian poet, perhaps the most translated contemporary Indian poet with 32 collections of translations in 19 languages. He has authored 24 collections of poetry, 4 books of travel, a full-length play, books of critical essays, and books for children. He has headed some of the most prestigious cultural and literary organizations and won 52 literary awards from different states and countries. Arundhathi Subramaniam, all of you old friends actually.
So anyway, this is for the audience, yes.
This audience and for our archive when this video goes into.
Is there an archive?
Archive on the Cappuccino readings,
Okay.
Cappuccino Adda page. So Arundhathi Subramaniam is an acclaimed Indian poet who has authored 5 books of poetry, most recently Love Without a Story in 2019, When God is a Traveler in 2014. Her prose books include The Book of Buddha and Sadhguru, More Than a Life. She has co-authored Adi Yogi, The Source of Yoga. And as editor, her most recent book is Penguin Anthology of Sacred Poetry called Eating God. Sampurna Chattarji is a writer, translator, and teacher. Her 18 books include 8 poetry titles, the most recent being Space Gulliver, Chronicles of an Alien, Elsewhere, Where Else, Over and Underground in Paris and Mumbai. The last 2 collaborative efforts, unique and beautiful. Dirty Love is a collection of short stories. Her translation of Joy Goswami's selected poems is a Harper Perennial, and Wordy Gurdy Boom, her translation of Sukumar Roy, is a Puffin classic. She is currently poetry editor at the Indian Quarterly. Ashok Vajpeyi, who will be joining us, is a Hindi poet, critic, and a major cultural figure in India. Apart from more than 15 books of poetry, 10 of criticism in Hindi, and 4 books on art in English, to his credit, he has 3 books in English translation, 1 in French, 2 in Polish, besides 6 in Indian languages. Widely recognized as an outstanding promoter of culture and an innovative institution builder, he has raised his voice for the autonomy of literature and the arts against contemporary tyrannies of ideologies, markets, and fundamentalism. So welcome again, and let us begin our Adda. Welcome everyone who has come in to listen to us. Um, so, Singing in the Dark, we will have a first round which will speak about how uh, writers and artists what is this dark that we are speaking about according to you, and despite that, singing, and how different artists have connected differently. Before we begin, I would like to welcome Ashok Vajpeyi ji. Welcome, Ashok ji.
Thank you for
Yes,
inviting me.
Thank
yes.
you.
Very, very happy and honored to have you with us. Uh, so we will begin by Arundhati. Can we start with you? If you'd like to speak upon about what is this dark times that we speak about, because perhaps different poets and artists have interpreted this differently, though it is about the same world that we inhabit. So over to you, Arundhati.
Okay. I was hoping actually to hear first from Sachi as the editor, but
He is in a way co-hosting with us, so therefore,
Yeah. I'll be the last. I'll be happy to be the last.
okay. I want to say, just to say something about where I'm coming from, Anjali. These times have been, let me say this, I'm not unfamiliar with the hermetic life. So 10 years ago, I actually made quite a conscious decision to go and spend large swathes of time in an ashram in southern India. And I wanted to work out for myself different strategies for engagement and withdrawal. I wanted both. And I wanted a lot of time for myself and my work and, uh, time to figure out things. But despite all that, I will say that this period, particularly the initial phase, and perhaps even now to some degree, has been difficult. For all my seeming preparedness, I thought I was prepared, but I realized it was far harder than I thought it would be. And I think some of it is perhaps because one is picking up unease almost atmospherically, and that seems to be feeding into one's system. I found that every time I sat down with any kind of agenda, in a kind of programmatic way, I'm going to sit and work on this project. And there were ideas that suggested themselves and ideas that I felt I needed to deepen my work on. But every time I did that, I found I would be confronting all kinds of invisible roadblocks. And I knew that I had to back off. So I think my way of navigating these times has been about trusting other languages, much more the language of the body, its need for sleep and exercise, and its need to just vegetate at times. Other languages, perhaps even, dare I say, the heart. Learning to go to travel slightly more inconvenient places that one had sealed and shut off. So I think it's been about not approaching this just cerebrally, and there have been challenges of other kinds as well. Externally, people I've known who've been infirm, unwell, they've been dead. So I think I'm not the only one who's been dealing with that. I know many have. So it's been a challenging time, and at the same time, it's been a period of self-reclamation, and that is still very much underway.
Yes. So more of introspection and perhaps realignment with the present situation and as related to your past and what you might plan for the future.
I often feel that it's a bit like being in a chrysalis and not knowing whether one will ever emerge a winged creature. One might just remain not caterpillar, but some kind of organic broth for a very long time. It feels like a time of a lack of definition, a lack of, at the same time, that can be a time of possibility. I'm aware of that, but one will have to see where it goes. On the good days, it feels like possibility. And on the more difficult days, it just feels like one has to find a way to witness what's going on, participate as sanely as possible.
Thank you, Arundhati. May I ask Ashokji to respond to the...
Well, unlike Arundhati, I have not been used to any hermetic life at all. I have been very much, as they say in Hindi, yarbash, somebody likes to have people around and friends and other kinds of things. So for me, there was earlier the possibility of finding loneliness otherwise than avoiding people. Now, one of the worst things that happened during this time, that everybody became dangerous to everybody else. Now, that is a kind of a distancing and a kind of approach to others that was under that was the ruling motif, as it were. And I felt very disturbed by that because we need others to be ourselves. No, I mean, we are not yogis or we are not people who can be self-contained. The self is itself, for definition and for fruition, need others. And that others are suddenly untrustworthy, suddenly almost dangerous, in any case, avoidable. That, I think, became a very, very, very disturbing thought and a moment. After all, poetry, through language, connects self with others in some sense. The others being not merely human beings, but also objects and birds and things. And so it became a kind of a, but on the other hand, because you felt endangered, at 80, I am in the most vulnerable age group. So, in a manner of speaking, death is knocking on your door. And then this sudden, tremendous love for life, also came up, that whatever has been given to you is a kind of a gift. So I wrote poems, which I mean, a couple of them are there in the anthology, but I also wrote poems remembering life, remembering other people, remembering what would happen. The second disturbing thing came when these millions of people walked home, the so-called migrant laborers. That was a very, very disturbing sight. It revealed how the state and powers that be could be so sensitive, cruel, inhuman, to ignore all this. And what was more disturbing, that the media itself, the major media, was not showing that at all. So it became a very, that we have become such an uncaring society, state. Luckily, fortunately, the society came in, and there are many religious groups and many other so-called NGOs which are under severe attack these days, who came up and provided food and water and other kinds of reliefs while these immigrants walked back home. So that was another side, which is. The third is that we thought that the worst is over. But it seems that the worst is yet to be. So it's a very, very disturbing thought. But I, for one, we have been, I mean, I look after a foundation, the Raza Foundation, and we have the Raza Centenary coming up starting next February. And there's a big show planned at Pompidou Center in Paris. So one keeps busy with these things and all that. And yet, many books that I had bought and had either half read or not read at all came to rescue. The others became, in a manner of speaking, others came through the books. So the others that you miss in real life, in physical spaces, and avoid, were very welcome in this creative space where they existed and you conversed with them freely. So books became a very important, I mean, they were always, but in this particular moment of uh, jeopardy and crisis, they became very. So other poets, and I have a huge collection of poetry from all over the world. So I started looking at it and sort of enjoying it because that was the world which was not being threatened. That was the world which remains live and, and, and human and speaks to you warmly. Uh, Words become in such cases, or I think in such a crisis for poets, words become life. Uh, the, the, they alone, in a manner of speaking, bring life nearer to you than the physical circumstances permit. I'll say that for the moment.
So beautifully put, Ashokji. In fact, that is what we were, that was the exchange that at some points this lockdown and isolation has given people time to introspect, and sometimes it is the other way around, that you are more aware of what is happening. And surely it is that tragedy and adversity brings out or exposes the true nature, sometimes the worst and sometimes the best. So and totally, that's so beautifully put, Ashokji. We'll of course be coming back and speaking
Sure.
again. I would now like to invite Sampurna Chattarji to tell us how one has responded to what is happening around us today.
Yeah, thank you, Anjali, and always a pleasure to listen to Arundhati and Ashok speaking from the heart of their own situations. Because I think what has happened across the board is that we've had to confront at some level the core of who we are or who we might have been trying to be. I'll begin by saying that for me, it was almost when this thing happened, when it just before it was announced, I had a very specific mission to accomplish, and that was to rescue my parents from being stuck and stranded in Kolkata. So just a week before national lockdown was announced and all the flights were stopped, uh, which was exactly the day that I was supposed to bring my parents back from Kolkata to Thane, where they live near me for the last 6 years. I realized that if I didn't go now, they would be stranded then. I think this rescue mission, the word that Ashokji used was crisis. This personal crisis that almost predated uh, the horror that would soon engulf us. So in that moment, the impending catastrophe was something that I felt, it's like when they say you snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. I felt a bit like that because by the time in just 2 days, I had managed to organize my parents. My dad is 80 plus with a heart condition, one of the most threatened categories from the pandemic. And my mom, when I brought them back here safely, all I felt was an enormous and engulfing sense of relief and gratitude. And I will never forget that night that it was announced. And I realized what Shokji was just saying, that what is going to happen to the millions who are stranded. I just felt, even now, I can feel it again, that cold grip of fear. Because it's almost like when you say that that could have been me, and how can I even begin to comprehend the scale at which this massive, uh, this massive strangeness has just descended on everybody. And being isolated, cut off from your loved ones, I remember feeling this sense of besiegement. And that was even despite being, as of course all of us are, um, much more privileged and safe and comfortable. But I felt it, I felt the cold grip of it, frankly, on my heart. And as the days unfolded, I would, my, I lost the filter, let me put it this way. I absolutely lost the ability to take in very frightening images, very heartrending images, without uh, bursting into tears, something I haven't done for very long. I just lost the ability to be brave. And I think the fact that I had successfully accomplished a personal mission uh, made it okay for me to weep helplessly for those I could not help. I mean, now this is just retrospectively, I'm trying to analyze the emotional engulfment that I felt at that moment. And I realized then that if I don't do something about this, I felt skinless. There was nothing separating me from everybody else. And I realized that perhaps the only skin that I could grow would have to be of paper. And I did this by not on the screen, which I use for my daily work. I did this by typing on my father's old typewriter, which I had brought back. I had brought it back from Calcutta because I had this feeling we'll never be back. So I rescued that very heavy typewriter and I brought it back. And I realized if I write on my computer, it's going to feel like work. And because I, unlike a lot of my friends, didn't have more time on my hands, I had much less time. And I realized if I didn't carve out even 20 minutes of writing time for myself, I would lose myself, I would lose my ability to cope with what was going on a global scale, and I would perhaps lose my ability to write anything at all, leave alone poetry. So I began writing in a very arduous way. The strenuousness of writing on my dad's typewriter, making that noise, seeing the contact of keys on paper and seeing this very visible, because all of so many of us have been talking about the invisible thing, the lack of, I think the noise, the contact, the visualization, the almost manual labor that I had to put into making words appear on paper. I will say now, this is right at the beginning of the lockdown, and after I wrote the number of pages that I have in my hand, I had, in a sense, cured myself of that terrible feeling of going somewhere irretrievable. So that was how it began. And I have to say that the business of life, something that I've never given much thought to, shopping, the quotidianness of it, will be okay. Where will we get our groceries? Things like that, which I never gave much attention to, living in a sort of ether like, dream like world at times, really helped me to give structure to formlessness, to see that there were other people much worse off, to talk to the roving vendors. Roving vendors at that time in Thane, where I lived, became our lifeline, our sustenance. They would be allowed for 2 hours, then they would go. So I suddenly started having conversations with people. One of them said that, ma'am, I run a salon, I run a beauty salon. But abhi to koi kaam nahi hai. Obviously, everything is closed. He is selling vegetables. I said, thank you, because at least then I can buy these vegetables and, feed my family. Things like that. The contact that became possible happened at a very micro, like the minutiae of everyday life, and these were some of the things that slowly, when life comes back in this incremental, very quotidian way, was actually the beginning of my reconciliation with this, um, with the horror, not reconciliation with the horror, but reconciliation with the fact that this was here to stay, as Ashok said. Yeah, so I think that was, I'll just stop there because I'm sure we'll do another round. this prep, and I have to say this quickly uh, before I pause, is that in my fiction, I've always been obsessed with catastrophe, with crisis. So my novels are often constructed about an impending end of the world. I'm interested as a fiction writer in the psychosomatic, relationship between the body and the mind, contagion, infectious disease. These are things that have been recurring metaphors in my fiction, particularly. Suddenly, those were just not important because here it was the real thing. And all of that felt like so much self indulgence. And maybe that was also an overreaction to, uh, to that earlier phase. But I could no longer say things like infectious enthusiasm or the contagious desire to do something. I couldn't use those words. Certain words, certain obsessions suddenly fell by the wayside, and quite I was very happy to let them go because there were very other serious other words presenting themselves to me for contemplation.
Wow. So in a way, it is that the vocabulary changes with such almost a paradigm shift in our lives. Thank you, Sampurna. That was really beautiful to think of tangible paper and words being put on paper and not in virtual space as becoming your skin because you felt so vulnerable with what was happening around you. Thank you so much. We'll of course come back and there'll be two other rounds where we do more adda about what is this. I would invite now Sachida to express himself.
Well, I'm not unfamiliar with seasons of solitude. In fact, I have lived between seasons where people were present and seasons where I was practically alone, alone in the sense, at least spiritually alone. And I need both these to sustain myself because I need to be among the people because I do literary festivals. I travel a lot. I meet people. I meet writers particularly, and I miss all that. But this was a particular kind of solitude because, as I said, I am familiar with solitude, but this was a special kind of solitude, something dark, something heavy, something out of which I was not sure at all that I would be able to come out. I would be able to come. So this there was a kind of uncertainty that gripped me like it gripped many of us. So the question was how to confront this uncertainty and how to make life meaningful even during these dark days, or to put it simply, how to sing in the dark. Well, in fact, I wrote a few poems responding to this situation, and not direct ones, but it was actually, I mean, a kind of contemplation of life during such periods of life. I wrote, a poem called "Alone." That is the first poem I wrote during this season, and then a few other poems. And then, watching the migration, I wrote one or two poems about the condition of the people. And then, when I found myself writing, I began to think others also might be maybe might be writing, trying to articulate their own responses to this very special and very unique kind of situation. And I found that there were quite a few poems on the social media, some in the print media. And that is how I came across Ashokji's poems also. It was on his Facebook, which I immediately translated. Not for the anthology, because at that time I didn't have the idea of the anthology at all. It was then that Mrs. Chawla, about whom I know very little actually, even now, she wrote to me, can you help me in editing an anthology of responses, aesthetic responses to the pandemic? I thought about it. I was a little unwilling to actually in the beginning. is it proper? Is it I had some kind of ethical concerns. Is it proper to bring together these poets responding to the pandemic? And I mean, is there a moral issue there? No. Finally, I said no. That is one way of connecting, one way of bringing responses together and bringing people together through poetry. And when I was convinced I was not doing something immoral or amoral, I thought, well, I should do that. And I told her, yes, we will co-edit the anthology. And I began to write to, various people, poets I knew, many of whom also helped by writing to their friends. And that was how the whole thing happened. And the title was given by me because, those lines are very dear to me. But Thought Brett's lines, which I very often quoted in my talks and all that, about singing. I mean, will there be singing in dark times? Yes, there will be singing about the dark times. And so that was one way in which I made myself useful during these rather dark days. And then I had then there was another life, virtual life, opening up before me because festivals were happening all around. There were invitations from Medellin, from Jaipur, from various kinds of festivals, in which I was taking part virtually, and there were invitations for conversations, talks, readings, and some of which, of course, sometimes I feel it is too heavy, too much of a burden. But sometimes when I'm in a kind of mood, well, I say yes, even though later I sometimes regret it, but this happens always to all of us. But then, well, that also gave some kind of a meaning to my life. I was meeting people at least virtually. I was reading before a few people on the Zoom or on the WebEx or whatever virtual platform I was using. So that was another way in which I could while away, if I could use that ideal term, the kind of time I had before me. Thirdly, there were some projects which I had postponed, which I always had wanted to do, which I thought I would take up, and I did take up. Unlike Arundhati, who couldn't, somehow I found the meaning in that, because I have been a student of Bhakti and Sufi poetry for at least 30 years. And I always wanted to translate at least a few of them into my mother tongue, Malayalam. So I began with Kabir, whom I have loved always. I have written an essay long ago called Kabir, My Contemporary. I began with Kabir. I ended up with a book of 120 poems of 20 pages of Kabir's poetry in Malayalam. And then it led me on. I went to the Kannada Vachana poetry. I translated 4 of the major Vachana poets. There I had to seek the help of somebody who knew Kannada to get into the rhythms and the structures. Even though Kabir I could do myself, because even though Braj, well, I understand a bit of it. And then, well, I moved on to, now I am doing Bullesha. I have done 40 poems of Bullesha, and I may be doing more during this time, because this meant many things to me. On the one hand, it was, okay, in a sense, a continuation of the activity I had always been engaged in, translating other poets. I've done more than 2,000 pages of poetry in translation. So there was a kind of continuity to it. Secondly, it was a kind of spiritual solace to me, because that was what I very badly needed during this dark time when I was surrounded by disease and poverty and all those wretched and the darker dimensions of life. So I wanted an escape. And so this gave me a lot of time for introspection. And thirdly, not only it, but also the thoughts I shared with others, the kind of talks I was invited to give, the kind of readings I did during this period. All these also taught me humility. Not that I don't think I have ever been. I have been humble enough, but I thought this is a moment of humility, not for me personally, but for the whole of mankind. Nature is trying to tell us something. Nature is sending us a message. Like Bruno Latour has been saying recently, that you are we need a change of paradigm from the humanist phase to what he calls the post-humanist phase, where we have to see the history of the human species as an extension or as a small chapter of the history of the earth or the history of the universe itself, where it will be just a few lines, it will be just a paragraph in the history of the universe. So this kind of humility, this is what I mean by humility.
that is
And this, yeah,
right.
this is what I, yeah, what I meant by bhakti also when I was, bhakti to me also has been a form of extreme humility, being humble before the mystery of the cosmos, which I think it is a very essential and fundamental human feeling. And so well, so the translation of the bhakti poets, the study of a lot of thinkers, Yuval Noah Harari, Bruno Latour, Donna Haraway, and quite a lot of them, all these brought to me this lesson that we need to learn a lot from nature, because when I looked out the window, I found well, the trees were still in flower. Nothing had happened to them. I found birds which I had never found in Delhi when I looked out. I heard sounds of birds and various kinds of bees which I could never hear in the halabalu of the city. And so nature was still alive, and it alive, kicking, trying to tell us something, trying to teach us something about being lighter, being humbler, being more modest. And so that well, that was in that
That
sense
I think is
uh,
so
yeah.
beautifully translated into your poem in the book, which you will read for us
Yeah, I'll do
later.
that. Yeah, I'll do that later.
But
I don't want to go
talk
on
about
talking. I
this
would say
piece.
that it was, yeah, it was a kind of Zen moment for me in that sense, a kind of sudden revelation. I knew this all the while, but this was a kind of revelation, a real Zen moment when I felt, well, our life, not only our life is short, which I always knew, but perhaps the life of the human species is also not as long as perhaps we had thought of it. So thoughts, sad thoughts, but also humbling and meaningful thoughts, filled my days during the lockdown and after that.
Thank you, thank you. That's such a significant idea that we should all hold dear. That one is so engrossed in one's own life and the business of living that one does not think beyond that. And perhaps this has given us an idea. However, what I do draw from these beautiful things that everyone has said today is that, and this book is evidence that it's called a global anthology of poetry under lockdown. And in fact,
There's
strangely,
not poetry that is under lockdown, actually.
yes, strangely, it is that poetry is not under lockdown. And if we listen to the voices of these, plus so many people have been saying today that, poetry is read more. More poetry books are being bought by people. So perhaps one little hope. Uh, I would now go into our second round, where perhaps uh, everyone might respond to what has been said, or read a poem from the book of a
Maybe
poet.
both.
Yes, we'll do both.
Possible. In
So,
fact, I just
Arundhati,
wanted to, I was just, it's been wonderful listening to the other panelists as well, because so much of this resonates. And I just want to add something to what I said earlier before I actually read. And the reason I want to actually lead up to the reading by saying that initially I actually felt I couldn't trust words through this time. Words seemed too glib, too easy. And I almost distrusted them because they seemed so airy and almost expedient. So I completely understand the need that Sampurna said she felt about wanting to work with paper and an old rickety typewriter. Because I think if something has happened, it's been the sense of a completely decentralized world. All of us interacting in this fashion digitally without any sense of an embodied interaction. And in fact, to lead up to what Sachi mentioned as well, the Bhakti poets who've been a long-standing source of consolation for me actually became very present in my life. One, because they often talk of catastrophe, but two, because they also implicate sensuality. You know, they speak of being sensual seekers, embodied seekers. And so often they also speak of an embodied God, a God with a name, with a form, with a smell, with maybe even a body odor, but a sense of a real living embodied God. And I think I turned to them for that myself very often, because it felt like it was such a world denuded of sensuality in so many ways. But having said that about words, I really want to congratulate you, Sachi, and Nishi on this anthology, because I felt a certain nausea as far as words were concerned, if they came too easily. So I've had to pick and choose. It's been like treading very carefully, picking out books with great trepidation from my bookshelf, dipping into some and putting them away because I knew I couldn't take more. It's been like that for me. And in that time, I think, of course, the worst of it in terms of my resistance is probably behind me. But in such a time, to read your book or to come across your book, which I also opened with a great deal of trepidation, has been quite unexpected and rewarding. I did not expect to be so happily startled as often as I was. I haven't read all of it. I've only dipped into it. But even the first few pages that I opened, I found myself drawn to what I was reading. So it feels like the right time to actually share poems, not my own. I think that's what this round is about, right, Anjali? Right. I want to just share a couple of poems I just chanced upon when I opened this anthology. And, you know, for a long while through this period, I wished I was a potter doing something terribly material. But I actually found as I was reading this that, you know, there are places here where words are used so sparingly and so, and there's a deep authenticity in some of these poems, which I'd like to share. The first one that I stumbled on was one by E.V. Ramakrishnan. It's an untitled poem. And I just paused at it because it is such it's a moment of, it's just preparing for erasure. Wow. It's untitled and it's on, I don't know the page, 242, untitled. Erase yourself. You are one too many. Keep the essential you on a single parchment, unwritten. Be the thread in the needle. Stitch yourself into something strange. Like a thatched house, you should last for only one monsoon. And the other one that I found was, I'm not sure how his name is pronounced, Sachi, but the South African poet Lanla Siliga. Yeah. So this is a wonderfully simple poem about setting out to fix the world, to fix everything external, and then suddenly discovering that something else might actually be getting fixed as well. It's called Handyman, and it's on page 295. I was a handyman inside the walls of this lockdown. I fixed my front door that wouldn't let me in. I fixed the bulb holder that had refused to give me light. I fixed the broken stringless guitar that I found under the bed. I fixed Spotty's kennel in case I got a new dog. I fixed the spelling errors in all my poems that magazines had sent back. On the last day, I called my ex-girlfriend and told her, "Dear Parton, I apologize for all the heartaches that I've caused you. Please forgive me." Over the phone's receiver, I could hear her cry. "I forgive you, Nanla," she said. Lovely. And I think I'll stop there, though there's one, if there's time, I will read you one more by the Spanish poet, whose work also struck me, Rafael Soler.
Soler, yeah.
Yeah, No Price is Too High. If your life doesn't fit into a lifetime, write a premature will. Organize the kisses that you wasted and go back along the line that leads to what is honorable about routine. Seek the chest where almost everything fits and leave it behind in its meager abundance. And may the life on the screen always be the life in the movie seat that awaits.
So many voices, Arundhati, so many
So
voices.
many voices and tones, right? It struck me that there are just so many tones here.
Absolutely.
And that it's a kind of inadvertent richness. These are not poets trying to be,
Yeah.
they're not trying to be rich.
Oh,
The tones gradually,
spontaneous,
cumulatively add up.
and
Yes.
it's very, very real and very, very poignant. Thank you, Arundhati. Ashokji, would you like to share something with us?
Well, I mean, unlike Arundhati, who just said that she found words to be somewhat unreal.
Someone's bell is ringing.
Can't
Sorry,
hear bell.
could you mute? A bell is ringing with some. Just mute. Huh. Fine, fine. Yeah, please go on. Sorry.
So, unlike Arundhati, who found words unreal, and I found them more real than ever before. But I thought words are the only light possible.
Yeah.
In fact, I write a weekly column in Hindi called Kabhi Kabhar. It's been running for 23 years without a break. And I've been writing about many of these issues in prose. And now together I'm putting a book which is called Thoda Sa Ujala, a little light, which is only words can give you the light. Sampurna talked about the typewriter. I've been using a typewriter all my life. For 25 years, I have a rickety old typewriter. And मैं कहता हूँ ये तोता है जिसमें मेरी जान है. अगर इसको कोई मरोड़ देगा तो I finish as a writer. So sometimes one can be a typewriter rather than a writer. But anyway, I choose two poems. One is by Norbert Gora, it's a Polish poet, and it's a short poem. It says, "The real virus. The sky is as clear as the surface of the lake. When people are locked up in their homes, an unexpected thought entered the mind horizons. Who exactly is the virus here?" Something which others have referred to, saying it is we who are the virus. And the other is Nicola Mazirov, who's a Macedonian poet, and the two short poems. I saw dreams that no one remembers, and people wailing at the wrong graves. I saw embraces in a falling airplane and streets with open arteries. I saw volcanoes asleep longer than the roots of the family tree, and a child who's not afraid of the rain. Only it was me no one saw. Only it was me no one saw. An humbling poem, if you like. Yeah. And this another short one, which is Silence, and by the same poet. There's no silence in the world. Monks have created it to hear the horses every day and feathers falling from wings.
Areva.
So, and of course, the idea that when your life is concentrated in a way, in loneliness, in isolation, you tend to look at, as Sachi was saying, that I take a walk around my housing society because that is the only permissible thing one can do. And one sees that there is a whole nature which is completely unaffected by, at least till now, the virus seems to be only hitting the humans. So it seems to be punishing the humans rather than nature. And the birds and squirrels, etc., are going around merrily and chirping and feeling life as usual. So there is already a kind of a uh, gap, if you like. Our empathy with nature has been so severely curtailed and so severely sort of isolated from reality that we tend to think that human reality is the only reality that we should bother about. There's a whole lot of other reality which now comes to you uh, and teases you as being the vulnerable humans, whereas they, the worms and the birds and the leaves and the flowers and the squirrels, don't feel threatened by anything. And this whole notion that we should live forever, which is one of the human kind of obsessions. And sometimes one say that poets write poetry so that they can uh, live beyond their physical life, if they're lucky. Then there is this notion that nature tried to do nothing really. You need not live all that long. Enough is enough, and and that kind of another feeling where you start looking at life anew, life which was around you, which is around you, but which you tended to, in some sense, ignore. For instance, I wrote a series of poems remembering Chinese and Japanese poems. So short ones, haiku. They're not haikus, but they're very short. They remember a moment, an image, or something. Like I can read a couple of them so that you get the feel of what I'm saying. Yeah, it is really called Prachin Japani Chini Kavita Ki Yaad. It's in memory of those poems that one has read. And in fact, now, बरगद के नीचे चबूतरे पर रेंगता कीड़ा सिर उठाकर देखता है, एक पत्ता और गिरा। बुद्ध की प्रतिमा पर गिरती है सूखी पत्तियां, धूप और ओस। बुद्ध की प्रतिमा पर गिरता है अभय। एक शब्द कौंधा मौन में, एक फूल अचानक खिला, दोनों अनछुए कुम्हला गए। So these are very short poems, but they're trying to recreate in a धूप को कहाँ पता है, वो खिड़की से होकर जिस फर्श पर कुछ देर है, वो किसी का घर है। तो ये जो हम नहीं देख पाते हैं या देखकर भी अलक्षित करते हैं कविता में, उसके लिए कुछ अवसर मिला इस दौरान। और वैसे तो कवियों का अहंकार बड़ा दीर्घजीवी होता है। बहुत सारे कवि तो जीवन भर अहंकार से ही कविता लिखते हैं, लेकिन बहरहाल जैसा कि सच्चिदानंदन कह रहे थे और अरुंधति ने भी प्रकारांतर से ही कहा कि इस समय हम सब एक तरह की विनय पत्रिका लिख रहे हैं। वैसे तो तुलसीदास ने विनय पत्रिका लिखी है और प्रसिद्ध है, लेकिन ये एक तरह की विनय पत्रिका है जिसमें हम विनयशील होकर अपनी स्थिति को पहचान रहे हैं, उसकी वेद्यता को भी, उसके बहुत नाजुक होने को भी, और शायद उसके देर सवेर जल्दी खत्म होने की संभावना को।
Sundar, Sundar.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Ashok ji.
That's it.
Uh, क्या कह सकते हैं, but we will look forward to your reading some more of your verse in the next round.
Yeah.
I would now invite Sampurna to speak and for read.
Yeah, before I read the poem that I selected, I just want to respond very quickly to the couple of points that Sachida and Arundhati raised. Uh, that thing about the sensual suddenly feeling remote. I think I still remember with startling clarity the day that I stepped out beyond the perimeter that I, used to limit myself to. And it was the exaltation of knowing that the world was still there. And not only was it still there, it was startlingly beautiful. And what Sachina said about nature, no, it suddenly I realized um, why had I not looked up before? Like why hadn't I looked at the sky or the laburnum? And it's not even that I've never been blind to the beauties of these, but I think the lessening of the cacophony that humans add to any environment cleared the way for a sort of heightened awareness of what stays. And I think I found this line in the the notes that I was making, because these are clearly notes of what I went through. It's a kind of journal, and I find this line here. Seconds ago, I gaped at the yellow laburnums, and now I stare at the red roses.
Okay, so
Sampurna, she's
I think hers is frozen for a moment. You want to just move on to Sachi and then come back?
we'll
Oh, she's back.
oh, you're back.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Two orange carrots
so
and half.
could you
Sorry.
read that again? You're
Oh, it was just it was just an itemization of the things I was buying, and all of them with colors.
okay.
I buy drumsticks, green pointed gourds, 4 dried lemons, 2 snake gourds, 2 orange carrots, half an entire pumpkin, and feel I have inherited the earth.
Uh-huh.
The thing, there was this feeling of, and I remembered that moment when I looked up and I was thinking that, gosh, this is, when have I done this? And I found another phrase about the sky was limpid with morning, a sheer transparent blue that shone equally on everything.
Mm,
And all over the sensational silence of seeing as if forever and for the first time a brand new world. And I think what everybody's been saying, this nature suddenly got a moment to breathe, while the rest of us might have felt a bit suffocated at our enforced incarceration. Nature was able to breathe. So I would like to read from the book, which I, like Arundhati, have been dipping in and out of. And I want to read Joy Harjo's poem. Um, I think I was totally gripped by the first line, and it just drew me into the way perhaps that I had felt, which I articulated some of that at the beginning of our Adda. Her poem is called I Give You Back, and it's on page 123. I release you, my beautiful and terrible fear. I release you. You were my beloved and hated twin, but now I don't know you as myself. I release you with all the pain I would know at the death of my children. You are not my blood anymore. I give you back to the soldiers who burned down my house, beheaded my children, raped and sodomized my brothers and sisters. I give you back to those who stole the food from our plates when we were starving. I release you, fear, because you hold these scenes in front of me. and I was born with eyes that can never close. I release you. I release you. I release you. I release you. I am not afraid to be angry. I am not afraid to rejoice. I'm not afraid to be black. I'm not afraid to be white. I am not afraid to be hungry. I'm not afraid to be full. I am not afraid to be hated. I'm not afraid to be loved. To be loved. To be loved, dear. Oh, you have choked me, but I gave you the leaf. You have gutted me, but I gave you the knife. You have devoured me, but I laid myself across the fire. I take myself back, fear. You are not my shadow any longer. I won't hold you in my hand. You can't live in my eyes, my ears, my voice, my belly, or in my heart, my heart, my heart, my heart. But come here, fear, come here. I am alive, and you are so afraid of dying.
Lovely.
So this poem just, there are many poems, but this one just grabbed me
Yes.
because it says, it's up to us to release it and reclaim the opposite of fear, which is joy. And I was thinking of singing in the dark, Sachida. This is a very strange association. It made me think of childhood spent in Kolkata in the days when load shedding used to happen. In the 80s, when I used to go to Kolkata on holiday from Darjeeling, and there would be power cuts, and there was nothing we could do. So we would all go up to the terrace of my grandmother's house, and while we, fanned ourselves and slapped away the mosquitoes, we would sing. I had forgotten this memory. Everybody would sing, my father, my mother, my grandparents, and suddenly this memory came back to me from this anthology. So I just want to say thank you yet again for restoring, I think, at many levels, so many ways of feeling well again.
Yes, that's what poetry does often, that it gives back yourself to yourself in a way. And that was really beautiful. Thanks, Sampurna. In fact, Joy Harju's poem was something that hit me as well when I first read this anthology. So really thanks for deciding to read that to us. I would invite Sachida to say something now.
Joy Harjo, by the way, is a Native American poet. Um, because then I suddenly remembered, Chomsky recently saying, we didn't learn what we had to learn from the tribal people. Because they live in such complete harmony with nature, and this is something the modern man has lost, or this is what modernity has often meant, a total alienation from nature and from the cosmos around us. And I think the intensity of that poem also comes from that kind of a rooted strength. Well, many of the poems which I love have already been read, actually, because these were the poems I had marked in most cases. And in fact, all of them, except Joy Harjo, are my personal friends too. Yeah, well, I had met Ciro here, the Macedonian poet. I met in Struga. I'll read instead. Mm, well, Amir Or, he's a Hebrew poet. He lives in Israel. Um, Camera obscura. Darkness doesn't distinguish between things, doesn't recognize you, except by your voice wandering among the echoes, by the sour smell of your fear, by your desire to rip your image out of the darkness, to rip a shadow for yourself out of the shadows. Darkness is a womb without walls. There is only myself inside myself. In the dark, locked room, a child learns to listen, touch, beat, pulse, and skin. I like many of his poems. There's a lot of introspection. There's a lot of love. Mm, I'll read another of his reflection. These are reflections that became frozen forever. This is the mirror. This is the mirror room of memory. A child in the darkness plays hide and seek with shadows, sinks into the secret places of the stairs, turns into shadow. A child in the darkness separates from his image, dreams, he dreams his face inwards. In a mirror of darkness, he reveals light and sees. I read another. I'll just read the opening poem of this, not the opening one, but one by Joy Matthews Alford. It's an American poet. Kitchen window. Standing here, the world looks bright. Squirrels still scamper, and red-breasted robins hope amid my freshly cut lawn. A lone but lovely lilac bush, and soon to bloom forsythia soothe my spirit. All seems right with the world through this window. Countless have been the tranquil hours we have shared. She has been my respite, affording me moments of peace and serenity amid life's tumultuous storms, shielding me, albeit momentarily, from some of life's harshest realities. Her gently framed view of the world provides, even now, a pastoral view that is sacred to my soul. I come to this sacred space knowing it has been given to me for times such as this, when reality overwhelms and would deny the notion that beauty still exists. This space where even washing a dish can return calm and control to my life, banishing such blight as disease and pandemic, signals that the ravages of devastation and loss linger so very close by. Okay.
Beautiful, beautiful. Very nice. So now, actually, thank you, Sachida. Um,
Thank you.
you know what? I feel that this whole period and this catastrophe that is upon us has perhaps given us a realization, in addition to what everyone has said, of what is not really necessary to our lives, that we used to hanker after and you know, spend so much time on, and suddenly those things become totally unimportant, and one realizes what is crucial, and which we were just ignoring till now. And I feel, of course, all of this, again, I say, in the background of the fact that we are privileged to be able to think this way. There are so many who wouldn't now have the circumstances or the patience to think about this as something that you know, is positive. You know, people who've lost their jobs, who've lost their homes, who've lost their own family members in trying to reach back to their homes from where you know, almost being cast out from the places, from the cities and towns which they had called home. And suddenly they realize that no, it is not. It is alien, and I have to go back, and perhaps that journey itself, uh, they cannot make it. And at such points, I mean, they would hardly have time to think about you know, what is important, what is not important for them. It's the day-to-day existence that really, but sorry to bring in this here, but whenever I think about what good has come out of this isolation, I keep thinking about people who don't have that liberty to find anything positive in this. Anyway, I shall now, in fact, it is like, you know, concerts with a whole lot of singers where they would always put, say, if Bhimsen Joshi was singing, he would be the last. And in today's Adda, what everyone has been waiting for, because when poets such as you are here, everyone's waiting for you to read your own poems also, you know. So we quickly go to the last round, and I invite Arundhati to read her own poetry.
I'll read two poems, maybe three, but the third is just a line, so it won't take very much time. The world takes a breath. The world takes a breath noisily, recycling anodyne text messages about the wisdom of looking within, photographs of mute anguish to give us our daily fix of indignation, a wild pandemic of pieties. Who'd have thought an empty hour was so much labor? We walk the day most times on steel girders of habit, knowing that as long as there are lists, the world is safe. That meaning won't save us, never has, but rhythms will. And only sometimes does all the fumbling and twitching swivel into immaculate choreography, and the sky falls away like blue laughter, and suddenly we are cycling hands-free on air. And the next poem I'd like to read is the one-line poem. It's actually a haiku, which has been triggered by a lot of the kind of WhatsApp messages that come one's way, a certain kind of fridge magnet wisdom, bumper sticker wisdom that drives me nuts. So this is a somewhat unkind poem, but not terribly. It's called Commandment. Commandment. When the world channels Rumi, you don't get Rumi. You get candy floss. And the last poem I'd like to read is called The News. Learn something every day. Learn something new every day, say the wise ones. And so we try. The news today is that there's no one at the Champs-Élysées, no one at the gateway of India, no one at all in the spice markets of Istanbul, the souk at Aleppo, that the great theaters and pulsating green rooms of the world lie plunged in silence, that pigeons hover like suspended confetti above the piazza of San Marco, that no one's ordering double macchiatos anymore in East Village cafes, that a woman walking back to her village from Telangana died of starvation in a Chhattisgarh forest. Her news, and it isn't particularly new, is that we're always 11 miles away from home.
Thank you, Arundhati. I will not break the spell. I shall just invite Ashok ji to read his poetry.
I'll read the original in Hindi, which is included in the book.
Yes, yes.
हम अपना समय लिख नहीं पाएंगे, हम अपना समय लिख नहीं पाएंगे। ये ठहरा हुआ निर्जन समय, इसमें पक्षी और चिड़ियां तक चुप हैं, इसमें रोजमर्रा की आवाजें नहीं सिर्फ गूंज भर है, इसमें प्रार्थना पुकार और विलाप सब मौन में बिला गए हैं, इसमें संग साथ कहीं दुबका हुआ है, इसमें हर कुछ पर चुप्पी समय की तरह पसर गई है। ऐसे समय को हम कैसे लिख पाएंगे? पता नहीं ये हमारा समय है या हम किसी और समय में बलात आ गए। इतना सपाट है ये समय, इसमें कोई सलवटें, दरारें, परतें नजर नहीं आती और इससे भागने की कोई पगडंडी तक नहीं सूझती। हम अपना समय लिख नहीं पाएंगे। ये समय धीरे चल रहा है, लगता है सब घड़ियों ने विलंबित होना ठान लिया। बेमौसम हवा ठंडी है, यूं वसंत है और फूल खिलखिला रहे हैं, मानो हमारे कुसमय पर हंस रहे हों। और गिलहरियां पेड़ों तेजी से भागते हुए मुंह चिढ़ाती पेड़ों या खंभों पर चढ़ रही हैं। अचानक कबूतर कुछ कम हो गए, जैसे दिहाड़ी मजदूरों की तरह अपने घर गांव वापस जाने की दुखद यात्रा पर निकल गए हों। हमें इसका दिलासा भर है कि अपने समय में भले न हो, हम अपने घर में हैं। उम्मीद किसी कमरे के छूट गए हिस्से की तरह, उम्मीद किसी कचरे के छूट गए हिस्से की तरह किसी कोने में दुबकी पड़ी है, जो आज नहीं तो कल बुहार कर फेंक दी जाएगी। हम अपना समय लिख नहीं पाएंगे। और ये 3 छोटी कविताएं हैं जो उधर तो नहीं है, लेकिन पुकार, सिसकी, प्रार्थना। पहली एक पुकार है, घरों के बीच की सकरी गली से उठती है एक पुकार, गुलमोहर और सप्तपर्णी वृक्षों को छूती हुई। इसे कोई नहीं सुनता, न कोई उत्तर देता है। पुकार हवा की तरह हम सबको छूकर दूर चली जाती है और हमें बाद में पता चलता है कि किसी ने शायद हमें ही पुकारा था। क्या कभी धरती ऐसे पुकारती है? दूसरी एक खिड़की है, एक सिसकी है, एक सिसकी है पता नहीं किसकी, जो खिड़की के नीचे छाया में बैठे कबूतर जोड़े को हल्के से दुलराती हुई छिटक जाती है अधर में, असमंजस में कि कहाँ जाए। हमें सुनाई नहीं देती और पास के मंदिर के शिखर को छूती हुई वह दूर चली जाती। क्या कोई सपना कहीं विलाप कर रहा है? 3 एक प्रार्थना है। पहला थी एक पुकार है, फिर एक सिसकी, अब एक प्रार्थना। प्रार्थना, एक प्रार्थना मंडरा रही है अबाबील की तरह, उस देवता को खोजती हुई जिसे वो संबोधित। पृथ्वी पर मंगल लाने वाला देवता कहाँ ओझल हो गया? एक लापता प्रार्थना किस ठौर जाए? कहाँ है ठिकाना मंगल का, उसके सहमे देवता का?
अरे वाह, बहुत खूब। थैंक यू सो मच अशोक जी। Sampurna.
Yeah, I will. It does take time to get, you know,
Yes, one needs
to
some.
move from. Yeah, it's
I
very
wish we
beautiful.
could play
Thank you.
some a little bar of
Yeah.
music to. But
So I'll just read the 2 poems that are here in the book. The first is called Nothing. I have been looking at nothing for days now, wondering when, at which unsprung moment, it might engulf me so utterly, all utterance would be shallowed. I succeeded in sweeping the verb away, dumped it in the back lot where the rubbish was burned, under the rain tree where the crows usher in the dawn with their cacophonous claim, now, 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 sluggard humans, wake up! It's morning now! They scream blue murder at times around 2 a.m. when all the pie dogs join in. An untamed feline from the hills is in their midst. They smell its jungle scent and are afraid, so afraid. They want us sleeping mortals to wake and take their side under the rain tree, where the pigeons were fed the scattered seed, huge greedy flocks pecking till scattershot by pistol sound. On that forsaken ground, I dropped the verb, once claimed by vagrant children with bats under their arms, on this shortcut from nowhere to nowhere, place of makeshift stages for events where no one comes, no music louder than absence, occupying so much space you never suspect that beyond the branches there aren't really 700 young boys and girls clacking their sticks and furling their skirts in slow, monotonous circles. I only dared to look at nothing after consigning doing to the dump. Now, nothing is all I see. I look and look, and when I find myself falling headfirst, I know nothing can stop me now. This vertiginous descent is written into my vertebrae. I shall not crack my head open when I hit bottom, because nothing is bottomless. And I have found my wayward feet and finally learned to dance.
Love.
And the second one is called Just Think When You Are Cured. And I have to say that it's inspired by X-rays, my examination of the X-ray plates of beloved people. So the descriptions in the beginning are from the way in which the X-rays are annotated. Just think when you are cured. Collapsed lung, child, an unusual opacity in the left lung, kidney removed, small bowel followed through, elbow dislocation, angiogram, hand, lung details disappeared, no air, coral blooming inside bodies, nocturnal and malignantly hushed, pinned down by neat arrows and labels in that black and white place of dread. You are in Michigan, I in Mumbai. In seconds you will come to me, fractured, bent, distended, the merciless eyes of the beast in the radiologist's machine. It is the beginning of healing, to know what is wrong. I will not let it crush me, pump me breathless, bellowing. Your wrist is adorable, a bracelet of bone. The northern lights blaze in your lung. Just think, when you are cured, we will marvel at how pretty they are. Those pictures of the country we carry inside ourselves. Just think, just think of the joy of returning to that heedlessness, that enormous ingratitude of the well. But until then, picture me counting 1 to 37, each second pinning down the phone line like an absurd postponement of pain. Living is a kind of mourning too, to hold what the dead have lost.
Correct.
Very fine, very fine.
Beautiful. So much there is. Thanks, Sampurna. That gave me goosebumps really. The way Sachida, could we have you read your poems?
I should, you said I'm a co-host, which I am,
No, 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 no.
in a sense, no.
We,
No, no, I'll read.
we
Yeah.
cannot
So
let
no, I just wanted to thank my co-panelists and for their comments and for the wonderful poems they contributed to the anthology. It's also my duty as an editor. In fact, I didn't want to include my own poems in the anthology. That is my general approach to anthologies. But well, there were circumstances which compelled me to include mine. I have three here. I'll read two. Uh, One for a difference, because we have all been talking about the migrants and the suffering and all that. So I wrote two poems around that time because that is happening in Delhi, where I live, and I was watching these people literally walking even hundreds of miles to reach their villages where nothing was waiting for them, practically, because there was only poverty was waiting for them. So this is about a person who could not catch a train because there were only a few trains, and so well, the poem will tell you the rest. The train, remembering the stranded migrant workers of India. That train is going to my village, but I am not in it. Its rails are inside me. Its wheels are on my chest, and whistles its whistle is my scream. I won't be there when it comes back to take me, but my breath. In Malayalam, I have used the word pranan, and I didn't find a proper translation for pranan. I know with that all the depth, in English, you can use either life or breath or life breath. Well, it is pranan or pran. I won't be there when it comes back to take me, but my breath will travel, seated on its roof, guarding my corpse. As the train stops at my village, my life will enter my body and ride my waiting bicycle along the old familiar lanes. My children will come running as they hear its bell. Abu is here, Abu is here. In which language can I tell them it is my dead body that has arrived? Of heaven or of hell? I am somewhere in between. Let the well talk or the pond. If water refuses to speak, let my life dwell within a crow on the drumstick tree on my courtyard and tell them the truth. And the second poem, short one, the circle. The circle. Joy is a narrow space between two sorrows, a space lit by the morning sun where a sunflower is in bloom amidst fresh blades of grass that two people can hardly occupy, and maybe a pale butterfly too. You can dance there with movements and gestures possible in that narrow space, and sing in a low voice, can even laugh mildly, tickling the baby sunlight. But there is little time. You know it too. The sun will soon grow harsh. Sorrows will squeeze you from both sides. You may even get trapped there, never able to get out. When the whole body bleeds, you may suspect that joy is but a snare. It is not all wrong, but you were able to see the flower and dance. But pain, it is eternal, and its space infinite, like the abyss that once trapped the earth. You will have to leave the earth to see there are stars even there. Who knows? Your soul may fly across many light years to land in a star. It will gain a new body there. Then you will know joy is but a narrow space between two sorrows. Thank you.
Oh, how beautiful. Lovely. Thank you so much, Sachida. So I really don't want to say this is the end of Adda, but it's the end of the Adda today. And because of that little thing with feathers, generally at our Cappuccino Adda, we would have these rounds, exchanges in a much physical kind of way, and then end with a round of.
You know something, Anjali, I'm beginning to feel that one of the good things, if there's something positive that has happened, and I think I felt it, I wonder if the others have too, is that we're actually having longer, sometimes deeper conversations as a consequence because of the digital medium. One is not spending endless hours in transit lounges, heading to some festival. One is actually having long 1 hour Zoom conversations, sometimes just a one-on-one conversation around poetry. I find this kind of thing has been, for me, actually, the reward of these times, and I feel an Adda like this, which allows one, we're all in diverse parts of the country, and we go back to dinner, thankfully, in our own homes, But it's lovely to know that one could spend an evening listening in, eavesdropping on what's happening in all your lives, and then go back to one's own.
Yes.
You know, so it is. It's made a certain kind of intimacy possible as well. The digital medium.
It has truly. What I do miss is a warm hug and a round of drinks and dinner together, which sadly we cannot do digitally. But you're so right. And speaking for Cappuccino Adda, what you say is even more important for initiatives like ours, who are not funded at all in order to get people from different places to Mumbai. So in fact, what we do end up doing is keeping in touch. And when you do come to Mumbai, having a at that real time, say at Kitab Khana or somewhere else. Nevertheless, thank you so much, everyone, for Arundhati, Sachida, Sampurna, Ashokji. This has really been a uh, very memorable evening, which I hope we are, as I was saying, that thing with feathers, that there is a time when we can actually meet and share these thoughts again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks a lot.
Anjali.
And for people watching, please buy this book. It is,
We
it
should
is
at this point hold it up in all its
All of us
tantalizing
do.
glory.
indeed,
Our annotated
yes.
and marked copies should entice you
Yes.
towards this.
Buy this book,
I mean, it is a treasure trove.
buy other poetry books, and stay well, stay safe. Arundhati, especially, I hope the cyclone spares us and is kind to us, even though we have been, as a race, so unkind to nature. I hope nature does spare us. All the best wishes to everyone. Goodbye. Thank you.
Congratulations again, Sachi. Lots of
Yes.
Thank
love
you,
for all of
all
you.
of you. Thank you.
Yeah, good night.
Good night.
Take very good care. Bye bye.
Bye.